not going to be here this Tuesday, this Wednesday night. I'm not going to be here next Wednesday either. So I come back on the 9th. Excuse, that's a good question. I'm going to go visit my...
So the question is, who wants to step in and teach for the rabbi while he's gone?
I will see if I can find something. Rabbi Emlyn or Rabbi...
Ooh, Rabbi Emlyn sounds like a great idea.
I'll run it by him.
So they'll email us. They'll give us, send an email on it?
Yeah, I'll follow up with you. Matt told us is really, we finished off last week's Parsha with, like we spoke last week, the entire marriage of, the whole story of the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka, and how they get married. And we just finished off the last portion of last week's Parsha was just to really finish off the story of Yishmael because we move on from him. So there are maybe references to Yishmael later, like in Asaph takes a wife, but the story of Yishmael comes to an end at the end of last week's Parsha, who is Avram's son. This week's Parsha starts with this tale and the story of Yitzchak Avinu, the second of the three others. So we know a few ideas. We know that it says that Ein Avos El Shloisha. There's no fourth father. There's no one else there's only three fathers. That's just the way it is. And even the mothers, there's four mothers, but when we say there's the fathers, there's three fathers, there's not four, there's not two. So much so that the questions even asked, we know that the four letters of Aleph, Yud, Resh, there are different reasons why. What is the hint in the name of the month of Iyar? Some people say Ani. For the Aleph, Hashem is Yud, Refecha. I'm God, your healer. Another thought is given that it stands for the three fathers and our mother Rachel. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. So it's Aleph, Yud, and the Resh stands for Rachel. There's a whole conversation. Why would Rachel be one of the three? Together with the three fathers, because Thomas and Yahweh there's only three fathers. And here we actually come to learn about who is Yitzchak. We learn in this week's Parsha. The Torah tells us a very interesting idea. The Torah starts off saying, and if you just learn Rashi, it seems like to be something a little bit strange.
Did you say that you do count Rachel or don't count?
Well, we do, and the question is why we count Rachel. It's a whole other conversation. But we see from the fact that there's such a question, we know that the Ein Avos El Shloisha, there's only three. So the Torah portion starts. These are Eila told us Yitzchak ben Avram. Rashi Badri says, why does the pasuk repeat itself? We know already that Avram is Yitzchak's father. Forget about the fact that we know it from the other week's parashas and the whole story. But even if one was to read just this first verse, and you say these are the stories or the children of Yitzchak, the son of Avram, so we automatically know that Avram is the father of Yitzchak. So why does the Torah have to repeat itself? And Rashi tells us an interesting thing, and it seemingly it's not so simple as it seems. Rashi tells us like this: that there were those, the Tzoni Hador, the jokers. The Tzoni are jokers. So those who just like to poke fun, who always like to bring things down, like to level things down. People get excited about something serious, something spiritual. There's always the person who says, "What are you getting so excited about?" You're overreacting. You could explain it this way, explain it that way. There's no great miracle that happened. There's nothing to get so excited. Like a month, but similar. So the Tzoni Hador are those who joke. And what they were saying is that how do we know that Avram's the father of Yitzchak? We know that Yitzchak and Avram and Sarah, and all of a sudden she gets abducted by Abimelech, the king of the Pelishtim in the city, in the area of Gerar, which is today in the Gaza area, Ashkelon area of Israel. And all of a sudden, yes, we hear the whole nice story that God punished Abimelech and he doesn't touch her, and he gives her back as he asks Avram to pray for him, and they become close friends, and they build a relationship, Avram and Abimelech. But that's the story. But the Tzoni, the people who like to joke, like the expression goes, don't confuse me with the facts. So they say, so what? That's what you as an old saying. But all we know is that Sarah spent a few days or some time with Abimelech, and she has a child after that. So they start trying to say that maybe Abimelech is Yitzchak's father. Maybe Avram and Sarah can have children, but Abimelech was able to in order to diffuse that idea, the Torah tells us that Avram, these are the stories of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak, not so much that he gave birth to Yitzchak, because we know that already, but Hashem actually made them look alike. Yitzchak had the same image of his father Avram, and by having the same image of his father Avram, no one could say anymore that Yitzchak is the son of Avimelech, because he looked exactly like Avram. He's an obvious image of Avram. So therefore, so it's funny interesting is that the Torah is so concerned about this.
And there's also the question that when the angels came, Sarah said, "Oh, I should have a child, and Abraham is so old, so she's like laughing about it."
She's not the case. Well, that's interesting. That's a very interesting thought.
She was kind of like a joker.
No, it's true. We call it Yitzchak because of the laughing. But the fact is that Hashem was not happy with that. But we see that was a conversation. Not only that, we don't. That was what you're saying. Is that what Sarah said to herself or taught to herself? And Hashem actually repeats that conversation to Avram, but he admits that part. He doesn't want to make Avram feel bad. You know, we learn a tremendous lesson about mixing. Well, not just embarrassing, about mixing into people's relationships. Because had Hashem told Avram that Sarah was laughing at him, that would have not been good for their relationship. So Hashem missed out that point that he said that I'm so young. That Sarah said she's young, but it doesn't mention the fact that she said he's old. That he's old. Sorry, that she's old, and that he's old. She misses out the point. God misses out the point to say that tell Avram that she said he's old, so it should make him feel bad. And it's also it's a tremendous lesson about some people say, well, it's the truth, but you don't have to tell, you have to be smart also sometimes, and not be have to lie, but you have to be careful what you tell other people, make it hurt people's relationships.
Rabbi Boganilsky's father said to me once, "You shouldn't lie, but you don't have to say everything."
Exactly.
Right.
Well, what was that? You shouldn't lie, what?
You don't have to say everything. There's no reason to just say stuff all the time. Sometimes, calling yourself back is a good thing.
Right. So, but the bottom line, what we see over here is, what we find important about this is that it's important for the Torah for the Torah to tell us, and it's important for Hashem that people should not, the story of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov was so important to the future of the world because these are the fathers of the nation of Israel, which Hashem created the world with intention, with the thinking that the nation of Israel is going to come into this world and make this place help make this place a dwelling place for Hashem in the world through the Mishkan, through the tabernacle, and then the temple, and through David, and then when ultimately Mashiach comes, that there couldn't be any kind of sidetrack of what the story was. Hashem wanted to make it clear. There's Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now, what is of the children and how they initially lived as a couple and a family? What is the difference between Abraham and Yitzchak? What is really the difference? We see clearly, even in Chabad circles, the different rabbis, starting from the Alter Rebbe down to his son, the Mitzvah Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, and so forth. You see that you see that a lot of times in general, in kings and in the history, in the world, lahavdil, where when there's a new leadership that takes over, things are not exactly the same. There's a new style. So what is really the difference in the style and the service between Avraham and Yitzchak? Although everyone has to serve Hashem, but everyone, we know that there's an amazing thing. We know that in the temple had 13 gates. Why? Because they had 13 gates of the 12 gates for the 12 tribes. And they had the 13th gate for the converts, or those who didn't know which tribe they're from. It was called the Shara Koilot, the general gate. For anyone who doesn't know where they belong goes through that gate. But it's not just a gate for the individual tribes just because where you belong. Different ways, different methods of serving Hashem. There is the service of the tribe of Reuven, there's the service of the tribe of Shimon, Yehuda, Levi, etc. When the Alter Rebbe composed the Chabad Siddur, the one that we use here in the synagogue, he composed it with the intention that it should be, because we know that the prayers are in place of the service of the temple. And because today we don't have the temple our service, our prayers, the kind of service that we can do today in today's day and age, in place of the actual sacrifices. So just like in the temple, there were different gates, different approaches, different services to Hashem. So too, there's different prayer books. If you look, there's different nuschos, there's different styles. There's the Ashkenazi Jews, there's Sephardi Jews, and even among them, and even among all them, there's so many different styles of nuschos. It says the Alter Rabbi gathered from tremendous amount of prayer books to put together his prayer book with the intention that this should be a prayer book for all people. And he said, I would like to make my prayer book a prayer book that's not for an individual group of people, but for anyone who wants to pray to God. Anyone who wants to pray to God, this is the method of the temple.
Who else uses these?
It's Chabad Siddur. Anyone who would like to use it. Now, so too when it comes to the service of Hashem with Avram and Yitzchak. Although, of course, they all served Hashem with their entire might, we know that the fathers were actually chariots to God. Chariots to God means just like a chariot is led by its rider. I mean, this chariot, it doesn't have its own agenda. You can't get into the car. Imagine you got into your car and you told you, and you said, your car turned to you and asked you, where would you like to go? And you said, I'd like to go to QFC. And the person says, you know what, I have a better idea, let's go somewhere else. If your car or your wagon started to get involved in the agenda, so that wouldn't work. So a chariot represents, the driver tells the chariot where to go. So too the fathers are compared to chariots, that they were actually chariots to godliness. There was no agenda, there was no personal agenda that they had that was separate from anything godliness. However, that said, they had different methods of service. Avram represented the attribute of chesed, kindness, and love. And Yitzchak primarily represented the idea of pachad Yitzchak, the fear of Yitzchak. In the attribute is the attribute of severity, gvura, fear. Now, what is the difference between the two? Right? What is the difference between the two? We'll find a few differences we're going to mention.
Well, who feared Yitzchak?
No.
He feared God. His service was the fear of the service of Yira. Now, for instance, where do we see it? Where does it express itself? What's the difference between? What is the attribute of kindness? Some people misunderstand what kindness is. If someone works for you, and he's in, I'm going to be kind and pay you. That's not called kindness.
That's what you.
You work, he earned the money. That's not kindness. Right? Kindness, I mean, if a person views paying someone for their service as a kindness, not kindness. That's actually called gvura. Din. Din is judgment. Gvura is everything is din, is measured. It means, for instance, how many hours have I worked today? How much did we agree to pay you per hour? That's how much I have to pay.
So then it's in terms of a degree of boundaries with limits.
Yes.
With, you did this, you get this. Chesed goes beyond.
Well, much beyond. For instance, where do we see this? When Avram was first approached by God, and one of the times that God speaks to him about his future, his children, and he already had the son Yishmael. So he tells God, "Lu Yishmael yichel lefnecha." Let Ishmael. What do I need? I don't need Isaac. Let's even though Ishmael is not the level that what you're describing who Isaac is going to be, but why can't we do something with Ishmael? God says no, it has to be Yitzchak. But the idea that Chassidus explains that when Avram said such a statement, that was an act of kindness. Because kindness, by definition, is to anyone. By definition, if you're kind to someone who gives you something, it doesn't have to be a job. But if there's an agenda, if it's a payment, if someone gives you a gift and you give them back a gift, that's not kindness. That's a kind of it's give and take. Kindness is for no reason. There's no reason for me to be kind to you.
But I do it.
But I'm going to do it anyways. I'm being kind. Compassion. Well, let's go to the other extreme. Judgment is scary. It means when someone comes and says that God is judging us, he's not being mean to us. Judgment, the Yom HaDin, the day of judgment, where Rosh Hashanah is, which is what din is, which is the attribute of Yitzchak, of Gevura, is to say, it's measured. How have you behaved this year? Are you deserving of a long life? Are you you get what you get? So therefore, when someone when someone says God is being strict with me, what's strict with me? Strict means he's being judgmental. Judgmental means that how you behave is how you get rewarded.
And our society doesn't look on judgmental as a positive aspect.
Okay, I'm not going to go there.
Our current.
So what is the middle ground? What is the middle ground? The middle ground is Rachmanos, compassion. What's the difference between compassion and kindness? Compassion recognizes you do not deserve, but nevertheless to give you. The difference is kindness doesn't look at the person on the receiving side. Is he worthy or she worthy or not? I just want to give. Don't bother me if the person's worthy, not worthy. Chesed, kindness, always wants to give. The attribute, but the nature of chesed, of kindness, is to give. Whether the person's worthy, not worthy. The balance is really compassion. Compassion, which is Farish, which is Rachmanis. Means you recognize that maybe they do not deserve. However, I'm going to do it anyway. For instance, if a child, your children, do something wrong, so the parent looks at such a situation and says, you know what? You've done something wrong. In theory, you should be punished.
Who is compassion?
Yaakov.
Yaakov.
However, we decided in such, and nevertheless, we're going to have compassion. We're going to have compassion. Mercy. Other extremes. Yitzchak is not judgmental as in harsh. It's judgmental as there's another aspect to din, to the attribute of severity that has a flip side, which is much more positive than kindness. Where do we see this? We see this like this. We'll get to the question in a second. We see this like this. The story tells us in this week's Parsha that everything in a sense that Avram has done, all the wells he dug were covered up. So they filled up my father's wells. Yitzchak's wells don't get covered up. What does that mean in the service of Hashem? Kindness, the downside of kindness is you're not affecting the person who receives. The person who you receive doesn't feel the need to change themselves. They only receive. They haven't earned. They only receive. So as long as you're giving, the well is flowing with water. As soon as Avram stops giving, there's no longer water flowing. It means it's like a person says, you haven't changed me. You only overwhelmed me with kindness. People that Avram had impact on through in his generation, the people that him and Sarah had impact on him brought actually close to God. They brought them to godliness, brought them even to an awareness of godliness. But because it was the basis